Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the new school. I see there is still people trickling in, but we need to start. Also, the chefs have to go back to their main occupation, which is not exactly being on panels. But they've been gracious enough to come here, and I'm really, really excited about this panel. So my name is Fabio Parasecoli. I am an associate professor here at the New School and the coordinator of the Food Studies program. Tonight's panel, I think it's very relevant, not only for New Yorkers, but also for metropolitan areas all over the country and the world. The growing success of different Latino cuisines and how, we're starting to recognize that Latino cuisine, it's something very complex and varied, and there are different national cuisine. People are getting into it. What does it mean in terms of cultural changes? What does it mean for the chefs? What does it mean for the culinary scenes in the country? Before I introduce tonight's panel, let me tell you something about the Food Studies program here at the New School. As you might know, food as a subject of study has experienced a tremendous growth in the past few years, both in terms of academic programs all over the country. Every 2 weeks I get an email, oh, there is a new food studies program somewhere, very interesting. And there's also a growing interest among students and the general public. Now, the New School has been at the forefront of this nationwide phenomenon. Beginning in 2008, we started offering courses in food history, culture, writing, business, policy. And we have recruited the mix of scholars and practitioners that the New School is known for to teach our courses. And the response has been tremendous, both from the faculty and the students. So now, after 4 years, food studies at the New School includes courses on food history, food policy, politics, nutrition, public health, as well as food in media and communication. Very close to tonight's discussion, we also have, for instance, a class on food and migration. We count 100 students, and we're organizing a major conference on the topic for the end of 2012. So a big conference on climate change, food security, and migrations. The food studies curriculum here at the New School is growing and will keep on expanding in the next few years, not only in terms of courses offered to credit and non-credit students, but also of events and initiatives in New York City, like this afternoon's panel discussion. Continuing our tradition and mission in our division, which has recently been renamed the New School for Public Engagement, we try to bring the reality of food culture and food systems into the academic curriculum and vice versa. For instance, last spring we organized a food studies pop-up class at the farmers market in Union Square, open to anybody who wanted to stop by and listen. It was a very interesting experience. If you want to check it out, we have it on our website. The video from that morning. I won't list all of our classes now, but I encourage you to sign up to receive our catalogs to see what we're up to. And of course, we welcome your comments and suggestions as we continue to develop our program. And now let's move to this afternoon programs. Tonight's event is organized in collaboration with Gourmet Latino, here represented by one of the panelists, Mariana Suarez. And as I said, I'm very happy and honored to have such a distinguished group of food professionals to talk to you guys. Let me briefly introduce the guests, and then I'll let them introduce themselves, which I think is going to be more interesting. Right here at my left, we have Jacques Gauthier, chef and owner at Palo Santo in Park Slope, Brooklyn. He's been the youngest chef to be invited to cook at the James Beard House. And I think he's still the youngest one to have received that honor so far. He's worked in New York, San Francisco, and now has got his own restaurant, very successful, great place. Next to him, we have Maximo Tejada, chef and partner at Rayuela and Macondo in the Lower East Side. He's working on lots of projects, and I'll have him maybe explain it to you, new restaurants, a workshop for research and product development, very interesting projects. Next to Maximo, we have Roberto Santibanez, a chef food writer and owner of Fonda in Brooklyn. And he's just published a new book called Truly Mexican. Native of Mexico City, he studied in France, so he'll tell us more about that later on. And then we have Mariana Suarez. She's the co-owner of Citrico Incorporated, a New York-based design and event production company, and she's one of the co-founders of Gourmet Latino, the first socially conscious platform that promotes Latin gastronomy and cultures. And here we have other members of Gourmet Latino too. So let's start by the introduction. So I'd like each of you to explain to us a little bit your personal history, how you got into food, and if you were not in New York City, what made you choose to come to New York City and work in this very interesting but also very competitive food scene? I don't know, Jacques?
Well, I grew up in D.C. and I came here as soon as I graduated from high school. I went to the Natural Gourmet, which is a health-conscious cooking school a few blocks from here up in Chelsea. I came to New York because of the diversity of the food scene here. I knew that any cuisine I wanted to explore, I could find it here. And I knew that just about any restaurant concept that I could pull together and execute successfully, there would be a market for it here. And that's what attracted me to New York. So an interesting piece in the Times this past Sunday that was talking about how many people you need in a city in order to support a specific type of cuisine or a specific restaurant. And they were saying it was something like, for a small restaurant, you needed about 1,000 people to customers, regular customers. And so then if you had a large city where 1 in 100 people appreciated your cuisine, in a small city, maybe you could have one restaurant that was a pan-Latin restaurant. In a medium-sized city, you could have 2 or 3. And in New York, there's really no end to how many pan-Latin restaurants or of other types of cuisines that could be supported. And that was really what attracted me. I knew it was a difficult market to break into, but I think that because what I do is so eclectic, I actually might have more trouble in a smaller city that was less diverse and less competitive.
Very good. Maximo, how about yourself?
How did I start? I'm a product of the Dominican Republic. I came to New York City because my family had a big dream for their kids, and I began my life in the city as anyone else, with a big dream and doing everything I could. I was a painter, I was a carpenter, I started being a nurse, I wanted to be a doctor. I went for interior designing. The last thing I did, I worked in a big project with an artist. And I got a huge allergy from the wood and the glue and the painting and all that, and I decided to take a break. And I started as a server in a restaurant, and I kept telling myself, why am I doing this, And finally, I fell in love with the presentation of the food. I always loved to cook, but I never felt the presentation of it. And having the energy of the interior designing, I right away took the effort to work on that. And I was invited for my birthday to a restaurant called Patria on Park Avenue, and fell in love so much that the next day I went to the French Culinary and graduated and went back to Patria, got the job, and became sous chef and then from there we started opening new places. And I became alive. I became who I meant to be. I met someone who inspired me to think of opening my own place, and together we opened Macondo, Rayuela first 4 years ago. And then 3 years ago, we opened Macondo, focusing on who we are, which is Latino and Espanol in New York City. We were not afraid to express our energy. In the beginning, people will come and feel that Spanish food will be either spicy or rice and beans. And we didn't want to give them that. You could have that in many other places. And so we started being ourselves, and we make the effort to stick with it. And right now, Rayuela is a place where people know by doing different things. And by that is we are expressing the soul of Latino in New York City. We are different. I remember when I first came to New York and feeling the energy of United States telling me who I was supposed to be. And in my dreams, I always said, I know who I am, and you're not going to tell me who am I supposed to be. I'm not going to follow your stereotype. And so I follow that with the food, calling the concept estilo libre, or freestyle. We have the combination of all Spanish-speaking country, South America, Central America, Caribbean, also Spain. And we influence all that on flavors. It's not about flags or country, it's about one language with many different flavors. And so with that, we were waiting for the right time to feel when we were ready to move on to do something else. And so we're getting ready to open 2 new restaurants based on Spanish cuisine. It's in the West Village. One is based on tapas, which will be changed daily, and paellas, about 8 different paellas, and 4 paellas, which will be changed daily too. Another new one will be an upscale Spanish cuisine, which will be based on different regions of Spain, with our twist, which is the freedom to be ourselves, although Spanish. Also opening a commissary, which is the brain of our dream. It's where we're going to do our products, is where we're going to base our PR, is where we're going to film small pieces for places like Facebook, Gourmet channels. It's a place where we want to train students from Spain, South America, and many places, so they can come and work with us and give us feedback from their countries and make New York a place where you can really feel that you can come and learn about Latin America. I think that more and more we have places where you can not only go and have a great experience, but also learn what we are all about. It's not anymore, I want Latino food, I'm going to have tortillas, I want to have arroz con pollo. We are more than that, and so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the young generation to feel that they can be here too, that we want to hear their voice, and we are an example of that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Roberto, how about yourself?
I was born and raised in Mexico City, out of a family, very fortunately, of very, very good cooks. My grandmothers, because there were 3 sisters, inseparable, would cook. Our lives revolved around food. The conversations at the table until 6 p.m. were about food. Food on Saturday, food next Sunday, whose birthday it is, what party we're going to cater, who's making the tamales, who's going to make the cake. The first conversation in my house on Monday morning was my mom on the phone with my aunts, and where are we having lunch on Tuesday, Wednesday, who's coming on Thursday? So I was born in a household like that, very fortunate, and learned a lot from them. Our games were about food. They will give us masa de tamales to make little tamalitos with them in the kitchen. It was actually in high school. I would stay in my grandparents' house in the summer, and my sisters and my parents would go away. and I will stay because I had to cater parties for my friends' mothers. I would do cakes and mousses, and my grandma will support all this craziness. And then I would stay, when I was in college, I will stay and work in the bakery at the corner for free because I just needed to learn, you know, these things. And I ended up basically not wanting to do anything else in my life. I never had a dilemma. I consider myself very fortunate in that. When they asked me, well, you know, you're done, do you really want to do this? It's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I was supported by my parents, so I went to school and the whole 9 yards, and here I am a few years later. Came to New York because of a job opportunity. I had a couple restaurants in Mexico City, and my friend Josefina Howard, the founder of Rosa Mexicano here in New York, and long gone, dearest friend, said, you know, you're the right guy to come and help me. We opened up a restaurant in New York at that time. She was having trouble with her partners, then I moved back. But I always had this, like, New York's the place that I want to be because I already had that experience. So I came back, and now after many jobs and many things, I have my own restaurant in Brooklyn where we serve, you can't call it traditional Mexican cooking because we do serve traditional Mexican, but we also serve contemporary Mexican. And we're basically a pan-Mexican restaurant. We don't focus on just one region or just one thing. We take foods from all over the country and mix them and present them and make things that I think are good, and always based on the platform of flavors, colors, and textures that we all recognize as Mexicans, and that we historically have agreed to do that, and trying to show also our guest that you know, it's not only red sauce over everything, you know, which was basically the concept that still prevails in many parts of America, and changing rapidly, though. I mean, this country is opening up to Mexican cooking more than ever before, and we're very fortunate to do this.
Mm-hmm. Mariana, you have a slightly different story. You're not a chef, but how did you get involved into food, and what does it mean for your work?
Well, I actually arrived in New York out of a family dream. My family had been living here in 1980, and we had to go back home to Colombia. And after years of being in college, they decided it was time to give me a little push and send me to New York, or just support me to come to New York and live a bigger dream. And I arrived like every other student, looking for work and a way to make ends meet, pay myself through college, and I ended up working alongside someone that I consider myself very fortunate to have met, and he's actually here in the audience there on the right. His name is Stefano Villa. Back then, he was a partner at Novecento, which some of you may know, a restaurant in Soho. One of the first Latin restaurants was Argentine and Italian restaurant in the city. And I started working my way from being a hostess, so the traditional story of just a young girl, just very enthusiastic, very passionate, that finds her way to all of a sudden opening up, creating a restaurant concept. After having worked for years with Stefano and having really gotten immersed in the restaurant industry, I fell in love with it. It definitely went far beyond it being a place for me to work in, to just pay my bills. It was something that I was doing out of pure passion, and that way I became very good at it, I guess. And I started developing projects from there. I became business partners with Claudia Castro. We started a company called Citrico, and we started doing events, creating cultural events that for us were important because they were showing a different face of Latin America to the US. And out of just pure chance, luck, life, whatever you want to call it, someone else came to the equation of Cítrico, and it's Karen Uribe, co-founder of Gourmet Latino as well, who came one day with this idea of just, oh, why don't we do a night of Latin food? Let's do a Latin food party. And we were, a Latin food party? You have to be kidding me. This is huge. We need to do a festival. And a festival became a celebration of Latin culture through gastronomy. And we founded we founded Gourmet Latino. Last year we launched it, but we really founded it 3 years ago. We've been working 3 Latin women out of the passion for culture, for countries to represent the best talent and all that our countries have to offer in terms of diversity. So we're here. This is year number 1 of Gourmet Latino. We've been having some really great things in the agenda, and we are actually getting ready for even greater things. So we're very happy to be here, to have such a wonderful group of chefs that have been of an immense support, and other many people that have made it possible to get to where we are right now.
As you see, completely different experiences, different approaches to food, different roles in the world of food. That shows how Latino food is evolving very fast. But I wanted to get a little more into the technical aspects of it. When it comes to ingredients, techniques, dishes, you've been talking about estilo libero and pan Latino food. How do you present this huge heritage, this huge and very diverse tradition to the American public, and specifically to the New York public, which is not the easiest one in the country?
That's always been a challenge for me, what to label my cooking and how to describe it to people. It's been called pan-Latin, eclectic Latin, Latin market cooking. For me, it's not a fusion. I didn't take a whole lot of cuisines and throw them all together. This is the cuisine I grew up with. My mom is from the United States. My father came here from Cuba, but he is a Haitian citizen. And my great-grandparents, my father's grandparents, were Spanish Sephardic Jew, Puerto Rican but of French descent, and Dominican. And so, for me to call my cuisine fusion is that, a few days ago, I actually just became a father recently, and I was filling out, the space on my son's birth certificate to, I had to describe my ethnicity in one word, and people asked me to do the same thing with my cuisine. Maybe I should have said, my ethnicity is fusion, but I don't know. It's a very difficult thing. Here in New York, there's actually this idea of being Hispanic or being Latino. There's nobody really in Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or Mexico who, if you ask them, what's your ethnic identity, like they're going to say they're Mexican, they're going to say they're Dominican, they're not going to say I'm Hispanic, And so it is a really interesting thing to even have that category of cuisine, of Latin cuisine, because you're talking about, a place, a part of the world, a whole section of the world, and a very, very diverse section. From the south of Chile, where the fruits and vegetables are not that different than here. They have 4 seasons. They have apples and grapes and other temperate fruits. And then there are the tropics. And so it's been a really difficult and interesting challenge to kind of package pan-Latin cooking in a way that the general public in New York City can understand it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to describe what it is that you do, but for me it's more emotional. Who I am is what I do. And so I pay a lot of attention to what I fall in love with. And so I'm very free in my emotions. What I do is I know who I am. I'm a Dominican person who lived in many places. I lived in Puerto Rico, Peru. I traveled to Spain. I've been traveling to South America a lot. My stepfather was from Peru, so I have a lot of that soul, and I pay attention to that. What is my cuisine? Well, I describe it estilo libre. I describe it freestyle because I have to describe it. It will be like describing my soul. I can't exactly describe that other than that it's open, other than that it's honest. And that's what I do. My cuisine is humble, honest, and it's on me, you know. It's a description of a person who is from Latin America, but feels like from New York. And so it is based on those products that I come with, but that I can use even better products because I am where I am, no? And that's where we becoming to be now. There are so many young chefs that are Latino, but you know, they are reading a lot, they're traveling a lot, and they're not just doing what is in front of them. They want more. They want to do what the French chef is doing, but he wants to do it in a different way. He wants to do it from where he comes from. Yeah, I want to make a creamy sauce, but I'm going to make it with my soul. I might use the techniques that I learned in the French culinary, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be French. So that's where we're going, and that's what we have to pay attention to. We are the beginning of a new era, and I think we have the people to take us there. I think that it's just about time to all of us put our head together and build this up to a place where the young generation can grab our hands and to keep it going. You know, I think it's a great space for us to keep going.
Roberto.
To me, what I do, I feel really fortunate that you know, I can show my guests all these different uses and techniques of all over my country, and all these chiles and all these herbs and all these things. And one of the most amazing things to me is how well taken it is. You know, I think in many places and in many cases, Americans were already tired about what Mexican people in my world tended to say, we're going to cook for them, so we're going to make it a little less strong and a little less. And I think when Americans started tasting the real thing in people's homes, and they say, well, so what you've been giving us? You know? So it's like, well, we tried to cook for you. And that's passing. That's, to me, I feel very fortunate because they really want us to cook like we would eat. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think that also happens in New York, and that's why we're here, you know. And it's people really wants to, you know, they come to us and they actually complain if the food is a little bland, you know. It's like, there's like, well, and where's the heat, you know? It's like, okay. So I consider myself very fortunate because I can do it, and I can explore all the ingredients, and I can put them in front of my guests, and they'll be, you know, delighted. Sometimes we make some things that are a little like acquired flavors for us, and but it's delicious, and they say, yeah, it's just a little weird, you know? But it's
But they try it.
Exactly, but they try it, and you know, we have some textures and things that are not really, you know, they come from within you growing up, right? So but I love being here, and it's easy, you know, in New York City. It's actually, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. If I was in Mexico City, it'll be a little bit more difficult to cook all that I cook here, because here you pick up the phone and you order a pound of hoja santa, 3 pounds of banana leaves, a packet of corn husks, and if you were in Mexico, you would have to go buy those things, you know, in different places, in different markets. You know, you would go to the Mercado Jamaica to get the hoja santa, you would go to here to get this, you would go there to get the dried chiles, and you can go crazy. I mean, you can spend the whole day shopping.
It would take 2 days.
Exactly, and here you make a phone call and you get it tomorrow. It's a wonderful place.
Talking about products, Mariana, you've also worked in promoting new products from South America. I was recently at an event organized about Brazil, where also Jacques was cooking. What sort of problems or what sort of difficulties are there in introducing new things and to make them available then in this easy matter? At that time, you were introducing new kind of fish, right?
Yes, we were actually recently working with Brazil. which is one of the countries that for us has proven to be a great challenge. And they had a new fish coming from the Pantanal region called pirarucu empintado that we're going to, they started marketing here in the US. So for us, it was definitely a very interesting experience because the event started with an idea, but obviously because of logistics, getting certain, I believe it was the pirarucu, getting it into the country proved to be a challenge that didn't allow us to present both fishes. We actually had Chef Jacques Gauthier do 2 recipes, one introducing more authentic flavors from Brazil, and the other one, his take, a more contemporary, Latin contemporary take on Brazilian cuisine from his experience traveling through the country. And I see that, you know, obviously there is much more available these days in terms of Latin products. Companies, both in Latin America and here in the US, are seeing how open we are about these new flavors, the exploration of new flavors. So there's much more now available to the chefs. There are definitely some products that are authentic, you know, to our countries, like certain fruits, and that you cannot find them the same way that you find them there. But I mean, our chefs are so talented. They're really what we call taste masters. And we've always been impressed at the things that they do and how they recreate dishes and how they just work with whatever they have handy, and that's what they're good at. So for us, it hasn't really proven to be a challenge. But we're very interested in seeing how this whole line works and how products start becoming much more available from Latin America in the US. And that's what Gourmet Latino wants to do, also be a support platform for companies that are coming and distributing new products and bringing new flavors to the US, and that we're connecting all those lines to be able to bring these flavors to the table.
I think what's very interesting, it's clear that we cannot box, you know, Latino cuisine in any way, and each of you has got its own style, his own creativity, and different ways of approaching it. Now, from a business point of view, because you're creative chefs, but you're also businessmen, are there difficulties to put those sort of restaurants proposing creative, different Latino food at a certain level in the food scene? Many New Yorkers at times think of Latino cuisine the same way they think of Chinese cuisine, you know, the little place around the corner. You guys do something completely different. Are there obstacles specific to that change in perception of what Latino cuisine can be? So a great restaurant doesn't need to be just American or French or Italian, but you can have a fantastic, high-end, hence expensive, Latino restaurants. How do you work that angle, that problem? How did you make it? Because you did make it.
I think that if you look at the history of different cuisines in New York City now, and take the example of Italian cuisine, I think that a couple generations ago we could have been, we could have had the same panel and discussed Italian cuisine. It was a cuisine that was brought here by immigrants. Many of them were coming here, to find a better future, coming from very hard, economic and political places. Once they were here, they experienced nostalgia for the foods that they ate at home, and I think that the same thing is happening with Latin Americans here in New York, and that's why when you go down to Sunset Park or in Jackson Heights in Queens, you see the markets there. They're not gourmet markets. They're just, normal markets for those communities that serve those communities. And they have beautiful tropical produce. There's also another source that we have for Latin American ingredients is the green market now, because the green market, mostly through the New Farmer Development Program, has helped a lot of Latino farmers to buy their own farms and grow produce, what can be grown locally. Of course, they won't have mangoes or pineapples, but what can be grown locally that are specialty ingredients. So we're finding all of those ingredients. Right now, yeah, of course, it is definitely a challenge to elevate Latin cuisine to the level of French or of Italian or Japanese cuisines. One thing that I've done is that I've really tried my best to use the best quality ingredients, as much as I can, local, fresh, organic ingredients, sustainably caught fish, and hormone and antibiotic-free meats. We get, all of our eggs come from a Colombian couple that has a farm upstate. All of our milk is coming from Ronnie Brook Farms. And so by letting people know that we're using the same good quality ingredients as the other places in the neighborhood in Park Slope, the other places that are New American or Italian or French, we're using the same quality ingredients, a lot of times from the same farms, and so that for us, that's been our selling point.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with access, which is control of quality, surrounding yourself with the right people, being the right media, knowing what you're doing. I think that the products that you have in your menu has a lot to do with the people that come to your restaurant. Having a personnel that that will want to have around you. I think that when you go to a restaurant, you want someone that makes you feel like you're home, but in a holiday. I think that you want someone on the phone that can describe exactly what you need. I think that you want to go to a restaurant that provides you with a room where you can have a conversation without having the music taking over your time. And you want quality. You want to feel the chef took the time to present something that it took time for it. You're taking time for me, and when you look at the plate, you know that that's what happened. And it takes one visit to that place to know that these people are on, they know what they're doing. And when we talk about business, I think that little details have a huge amount to do with the end result. It's the money side of it is different, but I think that when you take care of all my needs, I'm there. And Latino restaurants have to do it even more than any other, because when we talk about going to the Lower East Side to a Latino restaurant, they probably think that it is a rice and beans place. And so we have to work harder to let you know that that's not who we are. And so when you are in my house, I want to make sure that you feel like home, that it is your home, and that probably your mom is the one cooking for the whole morning to make a beautiful white rice for you. So I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that I don't have a French name. I have to work harder. That I had to go to the French Culinary Institute because that would look good on my resume, but not because my soul was French, My soul is Latino, and so I work hard on that, on not pushing it. It's nothing wrong with being something other than Latino, but I am. And so I want you to see the beauty in me, and I'm not speaking just of me, but us, Latino. There is so much that we have. There is the music, there is our flair, there is our color, there is our flavors. And so when you walk into the restaurant, I want to give it to you, but not in a merengue, but and a music that is soothing you, whatever that is, personal music for you. I'm giving it, or we're giving it to you, and flavors. And that's the side of business that we all have to take care of too.
In my opinion, and in our side of things, sometimes you do find some challenges because people tend to relate Mexican food with cheap food. And sometimes it is a little challenging for us to put a plate on the menu that is, over $18. People just like, oh, it's Mexican, and it's still a little bit challenging for us. And particularly, I think, also in the business structure is that Mexican food is very, very labor intensive. And that's one of the most expensive parts of our business. So, I would love to have an Argentinian place, It's like my dream. I get the cuts of meat and I sell them, and that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, we have to make moles and salsas and 14 different preparations every day. No, I know.
Just grilled meat.
No, I know. It has a lot more complexity, but still, you don't have to make 22 quarts of mole poblano. It takes 3 hours of one cook. It's a little labor intensive, and people just sort of don't yet understand that. That a ladle full of a good mole takes a long time to make, and it takes very expensive ingredients if it's going to be okay, if it's going to be the right one. Yeah. And we still have a little bit of challenges there, I believe.
The mole might cost more than the chicken.
Correct. Correct. We of course, you think in the moment, but I told Anna, who is the most wonderful person in my life, and it's my prep cook, and I said, oh, you remember that mole with pine nuts? Let's do it. So I said, yeah. So we both said, okay, and the pine nuts arrive, and they are $85 for the bucket.
Whoa.
So it's like, am I going to blend this into a sauce? I don't think so. People is never going to pay us for this. Never. So we decided not to do it, and we gave back the pine nuts. Yeah, because it can get challenging there.
Oh, yeah.
Pine nuts less.
Pine nutless mole.
That's the new name.
Mariana, as a cultural promoter, what does it mean to express the idea of a Latino food festival that is not immediately identified, with a big fiesta or a street fair or something like that? In terms of communication and media, what sort of language do you need to use to, convey a different idea of what a Latino food festival could be?
Yes, that's a very interesting point, and it's something that from the beginning we started actually working very hard on, and it's how do we come out of that concept that Latino, everything Latin was just seen as, that Latin food, that Latin fare that you found, whether it was in Queens or whatever, that just had a specific type of look and feel, and that it didn't really relate to all of Latins that are here in the city and to Americans. So we started thinking from the standpoint of branding. How do we create a logo that looks Latin America, that has a texture, the look and feel, but that is sophisticated? And we started working on a program on ideas. There were certain elements like music, which Maximo tapped into. Music is a very important part of our culture, and those aspects of our culture we need to highlight. So we don't intend to be anything different than Latin, but we just want to bring out a different image of Latin America than the image that has been mostly presented here in the US and internationally. And that's what we're working on by having a wonderful group of taste masters from the top mixologists, people that are not only Latin, but that have been like a Steve Olson, who is from AKA Wine Geek. He's a mixologist in love with Argentina, Latin America, knows everything there is to be known of mezcals, and who has been an ambassador of our country. So we start adding all these different components to just make that perfect recipe that speaks about Latin America, that speaks about that richness, that texture, that taps into all the cultural components. It's the folklore, but in a very sophisticated way. Mm-hmm. And it's about just putting the right ingredients in the right amount. So that's what we are right now. We've considered that we've done a very good job so far, but we still have to grow.
Now, a question just for the chefs. We all know that most of the labor in New York restaurants are actually people from Central and South America. For many chefs, they are not Spanish speaking. Sometimes it can be a challenge, not only linguistically, but also culturally. How about your restaurants, your businesses? Is that an advantage? Is just a neutral element? How do you deal and how do you relate to your labor that probably somehow shares parts of your culture, your heritage? Do they at all participate in the creation of what the restaurant is in terms of atmosphere, food?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'll tell you, a funny story. When I first moved here to New York, I didn't even speak Spanish, and I was living in Sunset Park, and I was working at an Italian restaurant, but there was only one Italian person there. It was the chef, and everyone else was from El Salvador, Colombia, Mexico, and Ecuador. And after living here for less than a month, I called my dad up and I said, you remember you were trying to teach me Spanish from the time I was a little kid, and I never wanted to learn because I grew up in DC, where it was not as large of a Hispanic population as here. And he said, don't worry. From that time on, my father and I only spoke in Spanish, and that was about 14 years ago. When I first started cooking in New York, I really didn't know what direction it was going to take me, and I had a passion for cooking. I really didn't know that I would end up going to a lot of different restaurants and working at Thai restaurants, Italian restaurants, French restaurants, and then really coming full circle and embracing my own heritage. And one major factor in that, in my own personal discovery, was that basically everyone I worked with, they were all Latinos from Peru, from so many different countries, and I learned so much, more from the cooks that I was working directly with than I did from the executive chefs that I thought I was going to be working under, because I wasn't working directly with them. I worked for a year at Vong, and I saw Jean-Georges maybe twice during that year, but I learned, a few things about Latin American cooking from the other cooks I worked with when we would make family meal. And so the cooking that I do now is very rustic. It's very eclectic, but it's very rustic. It's very different than the cooking that Maximo does, because mine is just very, very simple, rustic presentation. And really, I had two major influences in choosing to cook that cuisine. Besides my own heritage, was traveling to different markets in Latin America and seeing the cuisine that was served at the markets, and then also family meal in different restaurants that I worked at. I remember an article I was reading a few years ago was asking why there were not so many good. I mean, this was maybe almost 10 years ago, but it was the article was asking why there were not so many good Latin restaurants in New York City. Now that's changed, but at the time, 10 years ago, there were not as many, and specifically Mexican restaurants. And then, what the conclusion they came to was that the best Mexican food was being cooked for family meals at different restaurants. Mm-hmm. And so I said, why not, take that and actually make that a restaurant concept and let the sous chefs and the cooks cook a cuisine that they're familiar with and really have strong feelings for. And I thought that was a much more productive approach to motivating a kitchen staff, as opposed to teaching them a cuisine from a country that they, have never been to and maybe never even will get a chance to go to.
Yeah, for me, it's more about passion. When someone has passion, there is no barrier in languages. When I sit in front of someone that I'm about to hire, it's about how much passion you have for what I do. Do you know who I am? Do I know what I do? Have you been here? Have you tasted my food? what do you know about the place? And I think that once the person is connected with the passion of that energy, I think that there is no language in between. I've known people that have no idea of what gracias means, you know, like, and they're still in the line, just cooking and just trying to learn what the dishwasher wants from him, or sometimes what I need when I get really busy. I forget English and everything is in Spanish. But I think that once you have a passion, you always get to where you need to go. Always get to where you need to go. There is nothing in between you and what you need, you know. Cooking for me is not a job. It's not, you know, it's not about chef or in which magazine I'm going to be, or it's about cooking. It's about loving, getting my hands dirty and smelling the end results, and that energy continues to when the plate goes to the table and the person is tasting the dish and the person is getting up from the table and the person is saying good night and the person is saying what an experience, and the person calling back again and saying I need a table. That is the whole experience. That is the whole passion, and that's why I'm doing what I do, and I want that from the person who wants to work in my kitchen. And so I think that it has no barrier, has no, anyone can come. As soon as you have a passion, you'll be running the kitchen.
Perfect. Roberto?
To me, in my life, they're paramount. My cooks are, you know, the best thing that has ever happened to me. I learn enormously from them. Because I also push them to do so. You know, I go in and I say, well, what are we going to do? And we all pitch in, you know, and it's like, okay, no, but you know, my grandma used to make this and I want to make it. And I say, okay, so what was it? And boom, 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 and then all of us come to that end result, you know, because it's the different ways of cooking from all of them. They're all from Oaxaca, from Puebla, from Michoacán, from Guanajuato. We have, in our restaurant, we have people from everywhere. And when we consider something that is good enough, let's say, to go into the specials, it's because somebody made something and we all agreed that it was good. You know, the woman from Guanajuato, the guy from Morelos, the dishwasher from Puebla, the other from Oaxaca. We all taste it and they all go, It's like, we got a good one, you know? We created something Mexican and they like it, you know? And to me, they're incredible. I mean, I can be here because they are there and I trust them completely, you know? And now after some years of working together, of course, you know, it's just a magical word. And you know, those things about the Latin cooks in restaurants. Remember that recent story about the Daniel sous chef from Puebla, you know, and you know, Daniel's menu has now chipotle words.
Ceviches.
Exactly, and ceviches, because his cooks have influenced him in many ways. So it's a wonderful thing that they have. I think they have changed American palates by far.
Very interesting.
I'm sorry,
Mariana.
Fabio, I just want to add
Si.
that this precisely, what they have just shared with you is one of the core missions of Gourmet Latino, is bringing out all these human and personal stories behind the kitchen. We are not about creating, finding, discovering the next celebrity chef. We're about the people that are behind these cuisines, behind the kitchen, that are bringing to the table the food that you're eating and that you are actually enjoying, because it has all that passion and all that love and all that work that just happens in a kitchen the way that these chefs make it happen. And that's what, for us, for Gourmet Latino, is one of the key components of making a successful festival.
One last question, and then we'll open the conversation to everybody. You've talked about your projects, and you're all working on great stuff, very exciting. How do you see Latino cuisine in 5-10 years from now? What do you think is gonna happen? Any idea, any projections, any dreams, desires of what you would like to see in 5 to 10 years?
Well, I would hope that Latin cooking will really present more authentic flavors, and that Latin cooking will, doesn't have to be, dumbed down for the public. I think that that's something that I've always made, part of my mission to present the flavors, as they are, to really work hard to use, the spices and the herbs as they should be used. And I think that more ingredients will become, accessible. More gourmet ingredients. Right now the ingredients that are available from Latin America, they're limited because for the most part they're being brought in just for large supermarkets in Latin neighborhoods. But there's a whole other side to it, whether it's like gourmet honey from Uruguay, or high-end wines from Argentina or Chile. There are these really interesting products. Huitlacoche, it's a type of fungus that grows on corn in Mexico. It's like a truffle, only has a shorter shelf life. And all these things that maybe now, because of the high cost, are not being brought in as much, but there are restaurants that could use them. And I think, to this, in the same way that I, I'll say, compare it to Italian cooking. Now you see these Italian specialty shops. I don't think that in 1920 or 1930 you would be able to find, truffled honey and, all these like botarga and other, expensive Italian ingredients. And I see that change happening. And also, one thing that you really have to appreciate is that people who are learning how to cook right now are Latinos. And all these restaurants, there are all these Latinos who are going up rung by rung in the kitchen ladders, and we'll get to a point where I think that hopefully more Latinos will get to the a place where they are sous chefs and executive chefs and restaurant owners, and I see that changing. I think that as if I can pass this on to Maximo also. I hope that a restaurant opens up that fills the shoes of Patria.
Shoes. Well, I think that where I see the Latin cuisine is, I think the combination of South America, the fire of Spanish cuisine, which is number one, with flavors like from Peru, are coming to America strongly. I have many chefs. Our concept of having a taller, semi-school, which we can bring students from Peru and South America, and I said that before. But it has to do with the fact that more and more South America students wants to come to the United States and to be able to play with the products that we can get here that might be difficult for them to play with there. And the force between the power of the new Spanish cuisine coming to South America and going back and forth, I think that is going to make a huge change. Also, before, the people who cooked were the people who couldn't get another job, They had a little flavor, and so they will get a job as a dishwasher and then keep going. Now, people do it because they have a passion for it, and many of us are example of that. So, in 10 years, I see more people who go to college and they finish their life as great chefs.
Roberto.
I also share many of the things that they just said, but I also want to believe that through what we're doing now, the produce in our countries are going to get better. And the chiles that my country produces are going to be better and are going to be produced in the country, not coming from China, which is happening. And that one day the farmers in my country are going to go back and produce grade A chiles because that's the only thing they can produce, you know, and because we're buying them and because people is getting educated and the cooks, the chefs are getting educated and they now know that what's a grade A and what's not a grade A, and I think they're going to want grade A all the time, and that's going to benefit my country, and it's going to produce that better. And you know, I mean, I also look like Jack did about Italian cooking, and how long did it take for Del Posto to be open in New York City? You know, many decades, or any other high-end Italian restaurant. I want to see a lot of Latin restaurants at that level in New York City. You know, that we can basically say, oh, we're gonna go for a $250 experience, but we're gonna knock you, you know, and we're gonna have the place to do it. And I think I would like to see many of those, you know.
Mariana?
Well, I think that it's definitely, there's a really great movement happening around Latin cuisine, and that's why we're all here tonight. So one of the key examples of it is not only what the chefs here have already started, Roberto Santibáñez opening his Fonda restaurant, his small restaurant in Brooklyn. That is a clear example. Maximo opening Rayuela and Macondo, which are two wonderful Latin American restaurants, and Jack's creating the concept of Palo Santo, Bar Comedor de Vino in Park Slope as well. But we also have soon to be open, Chef Gaston Acurio from Peru is going to be opening La Mar. And as Maximo said, I think that Peru is going to be one of the next trends in terms of Latin gastronomy in the US. And as for years to come, I think that it's more about regional cuisines and bringing more of the diversity of Latin America to the table. And for me personally, I would love to see a high-end Colombian restaurant in New York. Not sure that will happen anytime soon, but that's a dream, and hopefully it might happen.
It'll happen.
Exactly. So.
Perfect. All right, so we'll start with questions.
working on it. No.
We have microphones that will be passed around, and we already have somebody over there.
Being from Tijuana, Mexico, and raised in California and San Francisco, and burrito, central as far as something that was created in the U.S. but still has a really Mexican flavor. And there was nothing, like zero. Like as far as I was concerned, the only ones that there were in local neighborhoods, and you really had to know or whatever. But so I thank you very much for opening those doors for many. I've always wanted, this is just a really curious question, and I've always wondered why Mexicans or Latinos in general work in so many amazing five-star restaurants all over the country and even just here in New York City, and don't take it upon themselves to really say, hey, I know all these recipes. Why can't I just take this Italian, this Thai, this whatever, and really break out of the mold of just working in the kitchen and saying, I can start my own restaurant, or I can do that? Because that's all I've ever seen in some of these amazing restaurants is Mexican or Latino talent that is not taking it upon themselves and saying, you know what, I can assimilate in this culture, as opposed to thinking I'm always going to go back home, which is always the case, and then 10 years later, 15 years later, they're still here with their kids that were born here. So that's always kind of something that I'm curious about, why that as you working with people, why it doesn't happen.
I think they're looking for image, You're always looking for a mirror where to look at yourself. And if the only thing you have is labor and your background, that's how far your mind most of the time goes, no? So I have many cooks that are with me for about 8 years, and some of them have cooked longer than me. And I always want them to get out of the line. You already know flavors, you know how to cook, but you need to know how to be a chef, how to be a manager. So it's hard for them. I have someone that even quit because of it, no? So it's hard for you to jump into a water that you don't know, no? You're so comfortable being the best cook, but it is difficult to see yourself in a different arena, no? And it's beautiful to say I'm a chef, but it is hard to, and our backgrounds, we look at doctors and lawyers and all these people above us, you know? And so if you're not from a family or a neighborhood where your neighbor is a doctor or a lawyer, you never go to school to get to that level. You just go to school to learn how to read and to get by. And that's what they do. They come to New York to make a better life out of themselves. And so if they can pay rent and pay for their kids to go to school, that's a lot more than what their parents did for them, you know? That's a huge jump for them. So they never go beyond that, most of them, no? So I think that is in our hands to teach them. I basically tell them, if you don't go to school, you shouldn't be here. No, we have a team, dishwashers and line cooks that, thanks to Mariana and her team, we got them to go to school to learn how to speak English. Is that a miracle? No, but it's a step for them to discover and be able to read a newspaper and at least know what's going on in New York City, and to make decisions, you know, to be able to communicate with the boss, to be able to communicate or to be able to listen to a conversation that is around them. Understand that if you are in a room and you do not understand what people are saying, you are in the dark. You are between the dishwasher and how to get back home, and how to take a shower, how to fall asleep, and then get up and do the same thing the next day.
And
So
the
it's
language
not-
is the most important thing.
Of course, the language is the soul, no? So I think that
America doesn't make it easy to learn English.
it's hard,
People
it's
can
hard.
live in this country for 25 years without the need to speak one word of English, and that's not good. We should try to. I mean, you call everything and press 1 for Spanish, wherever you go. So it's like living at home. Why would you ever want to learn? You know. So I think we go into the kitchen and we push them to say, like, I mean, don't do that. Watch American TV. Try to understand.
read the newspaper.
Read something. You know. Don't press 1 for Spanish. You
Press
know,
2 for
struggle, but try
Spanish
to
too.
speak to the lady. You know. It's incredible. Yeah, it's the language thing. It's a very, very important aspect there.
I remember when I first came to New York and I knew my little English, thank you, good night. And I'm asking for the time, and the person says, yeah, las 2:30. I'm like, help me out here, you know? So yes, it's not that they're not into doing it. It's just that it's really hard to get out of this, you know, it's a new culture, it's a big city, and it's difficult.
But a lot of them do go back to our countries to open up their
Up a
own business.
restaurant.
Yeah,
Well,
they
Well,
do.
That says a lot. no?
Yeah, they do.
They
They
could do
hear,
it
they
here too.
learn, they do. Okay, I couldn't learn English, but then they go back and they do open a little restaurant and they run it. So I think it's good.
To that note, one of the stories that has touched me the most was actually one of the workers of the restaurants where I used to be, or a neighboring restaurant where I used to work at the beginning, Novecento, had been there for years. I don't know how long, but he was there every day of the week working doubles whenever he could. And his dream was going back to Puebla to open his own restaurant called Soho. Whether he did it or not, I am not sure. But those are the stories that, you know, are extremely powerful out of the food industry. And I think that the chefs here are actually becoming an example to these people. The fact that Latin cuisine is now given a much higher name is becoming definitely, you know, an inspiration for these people. Before, it was about them going to the restaurant industry just to make ends meet and to, you know, support their families here in the U.S. and abroad. But now it's about educating themselves. It's about them creating careers for themselves because they're seeing that actually the audience at large is accepting and embracing Latin cuisine. And there's many more opportunities now for these people to seek after.
There's one thing, the difference between being an incredible cook and becoming a chef is, one major difference is understanding the customers, and that requires assimilation. You don't have to assimilate, you don't have to learn the language, you don't have to really understand American culture to learn how to cook and to prepare certain dishes, but to write the menu and to come up even with the concept of creating, of opening a restaurant, you have to really understand the customers, and that right there is a very difficult thing. From time to time, I take my sous chef, I take him out to lunch or out to dinner so that he can see what's going on in the other restaurants, because I know that he's an incredible cook, he's a very talented guy, but on his own, he feels uncomfortable going into a restaurant and just sitting down with everyone else there and spending, $50 or $100 on dinner. And that's something that's very important for him, because for him to get to the next level, to really be able to create the menus, he's got to understand what everyone else is offering and what the clientele wants.
I think this is a very important issue. Here at the new school last summer, we decided to open our classes to restaurant workers for free. We have a program that teaches young people to become English teachers. And they have to go through a practicum where they teach foreigners. And so this year we actually reached out to restaurants, and they sent their workers to work with us. Which was very interesting. And we're thinking maybe next year to try and see if we can send the teachers to the restaurant, because of course it's complicated with the different timings and whatnot. These young men and women want to learn how to teach English. Why don't we put the two things together and see if we can help, a few cooks to become chefs maybe in the future. Over here.
Hi, I would like to ask each one of the chefs if they could talk about what local ingredients they're getting from the green markets and how they're using them in their food, please.
The poster child for these local ingredients, locally grown Mexican ingredients, is papalo. It's an incredible herb that papalo kind of smells like cilantro, but it's like much more intense. This time of the year also, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, corn. There's so many ingredients that really make up the base of Latin American cooking.
Tomatillos now.
Tomatillos.
Yeah,
I grow those on my rooftops.
Yeah, I know you do.
Hot peppers.
Yeah, some peppers now. In the season, it's great. And in the season, we also get the potatoes, the sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah.
And in microgreens, we use a lot of the micro parsnips, and we used a lot of organic carrots. We make a lot of fresh cold soups, and so anything that has to do with that, it's taken care by the greenery and the new thing for summer, which basically all the basically fall in love with tomatoes for summertime is just, what else do you need? Salt and olive oil, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So we played a lot with that.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say the most interesting thing, it's a bit odd, but it's something that you would never find just in a normal market, are unlaid eggs. If you've been to a market in most parts of Central America, and you know the difference between pollo and gallina. Pollo is the chicken, and gallina is the hen. And when you buy a hen, it comes with the unlaid eggs inside. And the hens that I get from the Tello's farm, and the Tello's sell at Union Square and at Grand Army Plaza and a few other green markets. When I get the hens from them, they have the unlaid eggs, and then we make a delicious soup out of it. So.
Wow.
She's vegetarian, so she's looking at you.
Hi, I had a quick question just about what we as Latinos can do to tell our own stories. I'm thinking in particular about the richness, for example, of Mexican cuisine, which to a large extent has been talked about by Rick Bayless, who's kind of elevated for the national American audience. And on many levels, it's once again someone outside the culture telling everyone about the complexities and diversity and the richness of our culture. So what can we do to tell more of our own stories?
Well, I think we're getting there. We're getting there, and I think the only thing we need to do is keep growing our product, as a concept, and keep telling our own story. I mean, what happened with somebody like Rick is he has this tremendous instrument of PR, and of course, because he is a Native American, but no, that's the wrong word, but he is an American, he probably gets a little bit more attention, a little bit more support than somebody that comes from the outside, But I think it's getting there, no? I think we're all...
Yeah, it's a process. I think that is what I said. For me, for my resume, yes, I have to go to the French Culinary, and
Right.
I have to work in many places, so my name looks better. I can now walk into a place and say, hi, I'm a great cook, and my name is Maximo Tejada. And it's like, all right, go and clean some dishes there, But it's a process. We're getting there. More and more, we are standing in the mountain and saying, this is what I do, and this is my name. Welcome to my restaurant, Not longer do I have to play the Cuban restaurant or the, I can play with Latino flavors now. That's huge. That's amazing. We open in 2 new restaurants, and I say, well, it is Spanish cuisine, and they say from which region. To me, that's amazing, because before Spanish cuisine was paella and sangrias. What else? No? So yeah, we are growing, and it's going to take time, but we have to pay attention, and we have to be smart about it, and we have to be the face of the new generation, so we are a good sample for them.
And it's also about supporting platforms like Gourmet Latino and coming to these type of events and helping spread the word and bringing friends that are non-Latin and just sharing with them more about the culture. So we're actually expanding to digital platform, and that's our intention, to have people like you that are interested in telling those stories and telling them through gastronomy. So it's about supporting all the Latin properties that are out there that are trying to make a difference and trying to make that happen.
We have time for just a couple of more questions. The gentleman over there.
Hi, Chef Jacques. I love your restaurant. I love your whole Pan-Latino approach. And 3 of the most interesting dishes there weren't even Latin American per se, but had definite, let's say, Spanish influence. One was kingfish and grits. The other one was the white gazpacho, which is incredible, and the sardinas a la plancha. And it was interesting, you mentioned you were trying to get your chef to widen their perspective, and it looks like they've done it.
Yeah, definitely. We have a very eclectic menu, and our menu changes every day, and so we can incorporate a lot of different ingredients. I don't think that any of those dishes were, any of those 3 dishes were so far from Latin American cooking. Also, especially something like grits or polenta, which are very similar. That's something that my father, growing up in the Caribbean, he said he ate, every day for breakfast. His typical breakfast was polenta and bacalao. So
And
those
fries.
so those exist there.
That's not there.
Hi, good evening. I actually grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my dad's Peruvian, and growing up I mostly ate Peruvian food in the house. But at a certain age, when I had my own job and me and my friends, I had a pretty multicultural group of friends, they wanted to be more exposed to like Peruvian food, and it was around the time that there were a lot of Peruvian restaurants popping up in San Francisco, like Fresca and Limon, and they were sort of fusion, and they were really, really expensive, and they were always like, why can't we go get Peruvian food, but we can go get other kinds of food? And I would always just say, oh, because they serve fish, because that's like part of the coast of Peru. But I would always think about that when I moved to New York, also feeling like I want to be able to introduce my friends to Peruvian food, but we either have to go to Sunset Park or Jackson Heights. And I'm just curious, like from the insider perspective, understanding more about the food economies and import costs and labor costs and all of that, where you see that falling in terms of this rising generation of people who are just introducing their palates to countries that they're not familiar with and how to access those foods in an affordable way. Just things that you all know from your experience about where you think that's going or what will change that.
Well, for me, it's a long question. I took a trip to Peru, and I was already in love with it, but this time I went for the culinary aspect of it, and I discovered many things that I didn't know before, and is that I really loved Peruvian food. You know, I liked it before, and now I really loved it. And so when I came back to New York, I was changing the menu. Many of my dishes have influences of Peruvian cuisine. And that is one example of how we can change that in New York City, is by the more people that travel, the more they come back and ask for dishes. Mm-hmm. And so you're forced to kind of change items, you know. You're forced to learn what that is, you know. I've been asked for a dish 3-4 times a month, so there is something about that. And so, you know, there are more Peruvians in New York City. Well, there might be more cooks that are Peruvian. And with that, we start with family meal, and then something that is great on the family meal, you kind of twist it to make the special of the day that becomes an item in the menu. That's how all these little Caribbean islands are opening the door to a few restaurants in New York City, when before it was either Mexico or Argentina or Puerto Rico, which were the only restaurants that you knew as Latino restaurants. And now there is a mix of more growing, you know. People are looking for things that are different. People in New York City, they want something that they can talk about. Oh yes, I went to Peru and I had the best causa. And I know the place where to go. And they want to show off and they want to bring their friends to experience the same thing. And it's the same thing with every different country in South America and Caribbean.
One last question. There is the lady over there.
I want to ask how many people here tonight aspire to open their own restaurant? A few? Well, that's why I'm here. I came here hoping to meet you people, because you have a wonderful, excellent operating back of house. We know that we need an excellent front of house. And my profession is to find the house. So I get a lot of aspiring chefs come to me asking about, how do I open my new restaurant? How do I find a location? What's involved? And I love working with these people, because my passion is finding the house and seeing you succeed and coming into your place and having the experiences you're talking about. So I just want to say that on the business side of running a successful restaurant, you need to have an idea about the real estate landscape in this city. And I really enjoy teaching people about that and telling them up front what they need to know, even if they're in the process of doing a business plan. I can help them get all their ducks in a row, because you have to really have your budget thought out and planned ahead of time before you go looking for a location. And if I can help, that'd be my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. And above all, thank you to the panel. That was really, really great.